I'm actually going to get in a second to the agenda and the goals. Any good organizer has agenda and goals. But what I really want to start with is why the heck should you listen to me? What expertise do I actually have that makes me qualified to speak at Harvard Kennedy School about this topic? Why am I here? Why do I even care about this work? So I want to start with a little bit about why I do this work and what it is that I do. So my dad, who is in the back row of the room here, is a war refugee from Lebanon. And he left Lebanon when he was 17 years old because his university closed, and made his way to Germany and then Spain and put himself through undergraduate school and then grad school or medical school because the opportunities for education were really violently taken away from him because of a civil war in his home country, because of the fact that people couldn't figure out how to speak across the aisle to people who disagreed with them. My mom is an Irish Catholic Longmeadow High School graduate from here in Massachusetts, whose family was so conservative that she was only allowed to go to an all-girls Catholic college when she went to school. So naturally, she graduated from college, and she took a solo bike tour of Western Europe. I think she got in a lot of trouble and basically had no money the whole time. Met my dad. They didn't really speak the same language. They fell in love in this really charming way, drawing on napkins, and they weren't able to speak the same language in a cafe in Barcelona, of all places, where I was also born. So the order of all those things is a little mixed up in my head. So I grew up randomly, after having been born in Barcelona as this half Irish, half Lebanese, strange mix of people. I mean, I look it. I grew up in this tiny conservative town in Massachusetts called Duxbury. I did not know, fun fact, I'm going to talk about a lot of things I don't know tonight because I think that's really important. I did not know that Duxbury was a liberal town until I was about 17, because it is so homogenous that being a Catholic in Duxbury is kind of a big deal, let alone being a half Irish, half Lebanese Muslim kid who is from a mixed family and goes to Lebanon summers and really likes Chiclets gum. The whole thing. So when I was growing up, the news that was on the background in my family was Al Jazeera. And it wasn't Al Jazeera because my parents really cared a lot about, I don't know, the stock market prices or how the Dow Jones was performing. It was Al Jazeera via this huge satellite that sat on top of our house because we were really trying to understand what was happening to the security and safety of our family in Lebanon, who was going through just tremendous regional conflict, one war after another after another. And so when September 11th happened, I have many stories around September 11th, including getting pulled into the principal's office, the vice principal's office, in my little small town in Duxbury, because I was smiling in the hallway the day after September 11th. And my vice principal wanted to know where my allegiances lay. When I went to college, naturally, I felt like this was a thing that I needed to understand better and I needed to work on. So I took a course on diplomacy. I majored in diplomacy and world affairs. And I spent a summer in my junior year. Of course, you guys will see, like you who are tuning into this and listening in person, I like to challenge conflicts head on. I decided that I wanted to spend a summer in Cyprus with a bunch of Arab American kids, Arabs, Jewish American kids, and Israelis, really understanding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which I felt was at the very center of a lot of the different regional dynamics that had been affecting my family personally. And I knew that if I couldn't get through this gunk, and a lot of my biases and my preconceptions and my misunderstanding of the other side, quote unquote, personally, that I had no chance as an advocate or a problem solver in the region. So I went to Cyprus. I spent 3 beautiful months in the beaches of Cyprus with these amazing young people. I dated this very cute Jewish boy, Baba, cover your ears. And we solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict together in simulation and over beer. And it was this amazing, epic, life-changing experience, as I'm sure many of you have had here at Harvard yourselves. or whatever schools you went to or go to now. And I really I remember driving home on the way back from that summer in Cyprus with my mom and my dad in the car and my younger brother, and thinking, I can change the freaking world. I have the key. These problems, they're logistical. They are logistical problems, and I have enough charm to fix them. This is gonna work. We can do this together. 3 short weeks later, I landed at my internship that I had lined up for the fall after my junior year, the fall of my senior year, at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. And this, as you can tell from like the enthusiasm in my voice, it doesn't really go away, but the current enthusiasm in my voice, this was like the pinnacle of my college experience. I was going to the United Nations. I had just spent the summer solving the Middle East conflicts, all of them, and I was gonna take my ideas to the halls of power as an intern and change the freaking world. And there's some giggles in the audience, but it's okay. I was 21. And I got there, and 2 short weeks after I started my internship at the United Nations in my oversized marshal's suit, war broke out again in 2006 between Lebanon and Israel this time. And 2 weeks after war broke out between Lebanon and Israel, and I had this cute Jewish boyfriend who was now very problematically in Israel, and my family was in Lebanon, and that was the whole thing. My family got the phone call that no family wants to get, that I had an 11-year-old cousin who was playing in his backyard in our family farm in southern Lebanon and was killed by a missile, by a US-funded Israeli missile. And there I was, literally sitting inside the halls of power at the United Nations International Headquarters in New York City. And I just have never felt more powerless in my whole life. And I'm ashamed to say, I finished out the internship and I went on my merry way down the path that many disenchanted activists go down towards law school. And I was actually temping. I had a temp job right up the street. Like, this is like, could not be more full circle. I had a temp job right up the street at the Harvard Career Services Center as I was trying to wrap up my LSATs and deal with my broken heart and my shattered sort of international perspective and framework. And someone lent me the book. This is 2007, The Audacity of Hope. Anyone heard of that book? It's actually the worst of the 2 Obama books. Dreams of My Father is way better. But I was this dorcas 22-year-old who just had my heart broken. And I stayed up literally all night reading this book. And I just highlighted passages. And in my brain, there was something that came together that I can only identify now, because when you're in the midst of these moments, you don't really know what's happening. But in my brain, it was like the UN had made me give up on institutions. Like, I'd invested in people and that worked, and then I went into this big, massive international institution, was like, they passed resolution after resolution after resolution during the Lebanon 2006 war. And literally none of them were relevant to the situation that was happening on the ground there. They passed a resolution finally to ban landmines, which had nothing to do with my cousin's death. So I'd given up on institutions, but then I read this book and I said, what if I was focusing on the wrong institution? What if the UN is actually like, I hesitate to say this because I don't think the UN's actually feckless, but I think they can be feckless. What if the UN is the wrong institution to be focusing on? And the fact that we have a US president in George W. Bush at that point in 2007, who's kind of leading the international sort of international policy, foreign relations framework, what if that's the actual problem? So I decided, like, really off the cuff, basically the day after I stayed up all night reading this book, that I was going to quit my job, borrow my best friend's car, and drive to Iowa. Which, like, I'm from Massachusetts, so Iowa is like, I don't know, it's like Japan to me. Like, Iowa was very foreign. Drive to Iowa to see what I could do for the Barack H. Obama primary campaign. So I show up in the old ice skating rink that is the headquarters in 2007, when there's like 20 scrappy staff that have no idea what's going on, really early on, when Hillary Clinton was probably 20 points ahead. and showed up, but they put me to work. I ate a lot of cereal. I slept on someone's unfinished basement floor. My poor mother, I had like $200 in my bank account for many, many months and ate cereal obsessively. I'm sure I still have malnutrition from it. And I got absolutely hooked on grassroots organizing. And I understood in this really visceral, different way that I think international advocacy doesn't give you access to in the same way. And I hope that tonight we can light some fires under people's people's seats on the same front. But I understood really viscerally that part of the thing that had been a disconnect for me during my time doing international advocacy and organizing was that I didn't feel like I was organizing my own community. And when I joined the Obama campaign in Iowa, even though I wasn't an Iowan, I focused a lot on training. I focused on helping people learn how to caucus. We won the Iowa caucus way back in the day, which was a huge, do folks remember that? Huge surprise, huge upturn. And then I went to Idaho and Texas and Mississippi and Indiana and Colorado and Virginia. And I kept organizing these communities that weren't my own. And I would go to these doors of people who lived in rural Virginia or lived in Mississippi, and they had Confederate flags at their front doors. And as a little organizer, I was scared out of my britches to go knock on that door and talk to that person. But I did because they were on my list and I knew I had to time and time again. And what surprised me, not every single time, but almost every single time, was that when you drop your shoulders and you smile and you listen to someone and you actually meet them human to human with real, genuine respect that's not feigned respect, that's not like some talking points about your values. It's a real acknowledgement of them as another human being across the doorstep from you in many cases. You can change more minds than you even imagined. And I also realized, sometimes the hard way, that half the minds we have to change are minds that in other contexts I would have totally disrespected and disagreed with. And so my big mission, I've gone on to do all sorts of crazy things. I sort of accidentally became the training director for the Obama grassroots movement and wrote the handbook on grassroots organizing because there were so many cool things that we were doing, pulling from Marshall Gans, pulling from a lot of the smart people in these halls, pulling from the Dean campaign. There were so many things we were doing that we knew we needed to codify. So I accidentally became the national training director, and I worked on the healthcare fight. I ran it in Arizona, helped pass healthcare reform. We thought it would take 3 months. It took 13. It was sort of a thing. But what I realized is that we don't have equal opportunity access to our democracy in this country. At the end of the day, we don't. It's hard to register to vote. It's hard to figure out how to volunteer on purposes and causes that matter to us. It's hard to understand how the freaking Electoral College works. How many people out here actually understand how the Electoral College works? I barely understand it. I'm like a political professional. Raise your hands. Actually, raise your hands. Because I'm going to call on you if you say you understand it. Okay, half the hands went down. Great, exactly. It's really weird. We have the strangest we have the strangest democracy you could possibly imagine. And it genuinely takes grassroots organizers to help average citizens organize it.